Welcome to the seed singulation and planting depth plot. My name is Jason Lee, so I'm the Agronomy and Farm Solutions Manager for AGCO. I come from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so just work remotely out of my house there and get the pleasure of traveling all around and coming to field days and working with the engineers on research and development and things like that. So it's been an interesting year to drive around the country and just look at the corn and beans and just how things change and just how much variability there is this year across the corn belt. So I can say definitely I am pretty confident I will not pull any ears this size at home. So in South Dakota we've been pretty darn dry. Fortunately we've caught a few rains in some areas depending on where you're at the last few weeks just to kind of help push us through and get us along, but come June I was thinking, boy, I don't know if we're going to have a whole lot to harvest this year, but we caught a few rains fortunately, and so it looks good at least from the road. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about seed singulation first, and then we'll talk about planting depth. And so, I guess to start, how many of you guys currently are monitoring your seed singulation or measuring that, or your plant spacing or anything like that? Just by a show of hands, or is that kind of a new? Oh, quite a few of you. So that's good. I always like to start out with why it's important that we measure our seed singulation, and start off with a story of we go out, we plant our corn, we set our seeding rate to, let's say, 32,000, depending on where you're at in the country. Then I come back in around V4, V6, and lay out a tape measure to measure out 1/1000th of an acre and count the number of plants in that tape measure, and as long as I'm pretty close to that 32,000, I'm good to go, right? The rest of the year is easy peasy. But one thing we're missing by just counting the number of plants, I might have had most of my plants come up, right? And that's obviously step one. But what was my spacing like, and what was my seed singulation like, within that 1/1000th of an acre, or for that matter across the entire field, right? I mean, it's a two-sided coin, right? I need my population, but I also want to make sure that all those plants are evenly spaced as possible, and that I had good singulation. So, we throw out these two definitions of singulation and seed spacing, and to some degree that they kind of mean the same thing. But what I mean by seed singulation is I'm dropping one seed at a time. Right, I'm not getting any doubles, I'm not getting any skips, I'm just literally dropping one seed at a time. Whereas when I talk about seed spacing, that's how uniformly spaced those, the individual plant spacing, between those plants, and how uniform that is. And so, we talk about singulation. I guess I know some of you guys said you're currently monitoring it, but what are you getting for seed singulation percentages, or what are you achieving for in your monitor? 95, 98, 99,
98, 99.
98, 99. Yep, and that's absolutely right. And where we want to obviously try to get that number, as high as we can. And I should back up and explain a little bit about what we're doing here with these skips and doubles plots. And so what we do is we actually create a goof plate where we drill 2 extra holes, and we plug 2 extra holes. And put those plates in the planter, so we purposely screw up, that seed singulation, right? So we drop our seed singulation down to like 93%, versus what we'd much rather be at that 99.5%. And, just what is the impact of having that seed singulation, that spacing, messed up? And so, I went out in our seed singulation plot here, and just laid out my tape measure and started looking at the ears. And would I rather have a field of this, or would I rather have a field of this? Obviously this, right? And so we talk about the importance of seed singulation and individual plant spacing. It's all about that per plant competition, right? So if I'm at 30,000 plants seeds per acre with my seeding rate, that spacing should be roughly 7 inches apart. And so ideally I want, 7 inches between every one of my plants, because that all those plants have equal access to nutrients, water, and light. And so for those essential resources, they have an equal competition, equal access amongst themselves. Now, when I start getting a lot of doubles, I start overcrowding those plants. I might have some plants that are spaced 2 inches apart, or if I have plants that are 9 inches apart, all of a sudden the competition between those plants change, especially as I start to overcrowd them, and I start to introduce a lot of stress onto those plants because they're now over competing with each other, for those essential resources. And especially, a really bad scenario, and maybe that's what happened to this one. So this is an example of a double, and what can happen to that ear size because of these plants being overcrowded and over competing with each other. And obviously this one's even a little bit worse than that one, and my guess is that this one probably emerged a little bit later, and fell even further behind this one. But since these were close together, obviously that's going to have an impact on yield, and obviously the weather is going to dictate the effect of these doubles, and how much yield loss there is. The hybrid's going to play an influence, whether if I have a fixed or flexed ear hybrid. But in general, this is a very diagnostic example of just the impact because of that overcrowding effect. And as we move through the season, as these kernels are starting to fill out weight, I would, especially if we don't get any rain, I would suspect that the impact of these doubles is going to be much worse. So if we have a really stressful growing season, that can really exacerbate the effects of that double. And now, we also talk about, a skip, right? We don't want doubles, we don't want skips. And so a skip, that's kind of the opposite. Well, obviously it's the opposite, but, that's anywhere where I did not drop a seed. So there's a missing seed there. And the thing about a skip is that, if I look at the neighboring plants, and this is the same thing, I laid out the tape measure, where we purposely created that skip. And because of that competition effect, these neighboring plants, there's no other plant there because of that skip, and so they will overcompensate some for that missing plant. Depending on the year, depending on the hybrid, my estimation is usually anywhere from 10 to 20%. So we usually will get these big sows next to a skip, but the issue is that this ear typically will never make up enough grain, or either of the two neighboring ears will never make up enough grain to completely make up for that skip. And so obviously we don't want any skips or doubles. And then we talk about plant spacing. The more variability I have in plant spacing, the more yield loss that we can expect. And so we've been doing these singulation plots for a long time. And so as a result of doing the singulation or the goof plates, we get anywhere around like a 93% singulation. And 93%, in high school, that would have seemed like a pretty good test score, right? But in terms of seed singulation or plant space, it's not what we want. So just by going from 93 to 99.5% singulation, across, and we've done this 25 locations. On average, we have about a 5 bushel per acre yield loss, just by going from that 93% singulation, or going from a 99 down to a 93, on average about a 5 bushel per acre loss. So it can be pretty significant. And, a take home that I would say is if you're not currently monitoring your seed singulation, I would encourage you guys to do that this fall as you're out harvesting your crop. If you're waiting on the grain cart, a semi or whatever, and you have a open rows cut out in the middle of the field, just get out and take a look at how uniform are my plants in terms of spacing, and then what impact is that having on your size. And if you go out and you lay a tape measure down and you're seeing 1-2 sets of skips or doubles per 1/1000th of an acre, definitely we should be encouraging to make improvements for the following year, because we're probably leaving bushels out there. So, any questions on the seed singulation or spacing aspect of it? If not, we'll move on into planting depth. And so, we talk about the planter pass, right? It's all these things that we need to get right. We need to make sure the seed spacing's right. We need to make sure our depth is right. We need to make sure our depth control is adequate. We got good residue management, all those things. And it's like a puzzle that we're all trying to get it all to connect and make it right, so we can set our plants up for good establishment. So, I might have really good seed singulation and really uniform plant spacing, But if I didn't set the depth right, that obviously can lead to issues as well. And so, I guess I'll open up the floor to you guys. Where are you setting your planter at? What are you typically planting corn at in the spring as a target? Maybe 2, 2.5, 3, 1, half inch. Hopefully no one's at a half inch or 1. Or how often are you checking your planting depth? Maybe that's a better question. Once at the beginning of the year, or every time you go plant the field? What we should be doing is checking that planting depth before we plant every field. And there's a couple things that we need to look for. And why is planting depth so important? Well, we talked about the importance of seed spacing. Well, planting depth, what that's going to really help with is it's really going to help with, uniform emergence. And so, there's a lot of research out there on, do I want all my plants coming up in the first 48 hours of each other, first 24, first 12? I've even heard, 4 to 6 hours. And, regardless of what research is out there or you listen to, I think we can all agree that the closer that those plants all come up together at the same time, the better off we're going to be. And planting depth can play a really key part in that based off of where that soil moisture is at. And so, if we look at, we've been doing planting depth studies for basically as long as I've been at AGCO, and that's what I have on there at the top. You squint your eyes just right, you can probably read it. But we go from 1 inch to 3.5 inch planting depths in the half-inch increments, and you can see just how big of an impact planting depth can have. Now, keep in mind that's an average over a lot of locations, right? And so on average, 2 inches is usually where our highest yields are attained, because that's oftentimes where we're into uniform moisture. But if you'll notice that between 1.5 and 3, those yields are pretty similar. And honestly, location by location, between that 1.5 and 3, the optimum yield, can change drastically depending on what conditions were like on that day. And so what I like to do is, have 2 inches as kind of my starting point, if you will. And when I go into a field, look at, where's the moisture level at, and how uniform that moisture level is, and what depth it's at. And then also look at the extended day forecast as well. And so if my moisture line is, let's say, 2 inches deep, and I look at my AccuWeather or whatever weather app you're using, and it's looking dry for the next 5 to 7 days, maybe I want to go a little bit deeper just to hedge my bet a little bit, as that moisture line is going to drop down, just to make sure that if it doesn't rain, that those seeds are still in uniform moisture. Now, where we typically run into problems is where we're planting too shallow, so less than 1.5 inches. You can see, especially in the 1 inch plots, that's really where we're oftentimes not planting into uniform moisture. We also run into some root development issues at that 1 inch depth, and so planting too shallow can definitely be a pretty big detriment to yield, as you can see off the yield data. And then even planting really deep, that 3.5 inch depth, that one on average, we do see a pretty big yield loss compared to just 3 inches, but that's going to really depend on soil conditions and temperatures as well. So typically the 1.5 to 3 inch range is kind of where we want to be. And set it somewhere between there, obviously depending on the moisture level. And so that's why I went out and let's do a yield check here just to see where we're at in terms of yield and what was the best decision on this plot here. I was gonna have you guys all go out into the field and actually pull the ears yourself, but on the drive down this morning, the guy on the radio said a heat index of 110. So I was like, I don't think I'm going to get a lot of volunteers to do that. So I went out and pulled the ears for you. So we're going to have a little fun here, or at least I think it's fun. And we're going to do a yield check. So I got the 1.5 inch ears here, they're longer than 1.5 inches, the 1.5 inch depth there. So we'll keep these kind of straight. So if you three here wouldn't mind doing a yield check on those and keep track of those are the 1.5, because I don't have a good enough memory to remember. These are the 2. And I just went out and pulled just 20 random ears. So if you guys don't mind doing these 4, which is the 2 inch, and if you've never done a yield check before, what we're doing here is we're counting the number of kernels around, and then we're counting the number of kernels long. And typically on the butt, I'll start about 2 up, so about right there, and start my counts from there, and then same thing at the top. So that's kind of the range for the long that I want to get. And then remember those numbers as we move along here. So this is the 2.5. Let's see. I have to go back over here. If you guys don't mind doing these 2.5 inches, as we're doing that, I'll come around and write down everyone's numbers. Where'd you pull? Those are 3. Okay. Todd, I think you look like a good volunteer to do some
That'll work.
yield checks. How about you, sir? 31. Come from the 3.
Well, I did not do it.
And I'll get my notepad here. All right, how's my 1.5 inchers doing?
36 by 18.
36. Yeah, 31. I did that part already.
31.
Yeah, it was pretty consistent, about 31 on every depth. Which kind of surprised me a little bit too, but.
Especially ones that typically get ranked.
Right.
But
You get around.
18 and 16. If they were a little shallower, it's probably.
Right.
I come out here and looked at it and
Okay, yep.
if it would have been a half inch, it would have been too good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that one. So at 18 by 36, what were some of the other ones you guys had for the 1.5?
Never. That's what mine was. I never checked that one.
I'll come back to you guys. Who had the 2s?
We got one 18 by 32 and one 16 by 32.
18 by 32, 16 by 32, 31 by 16. 19? Damn, we need to save this one. 20. Yeah, that's a good one. 20 by 33, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good on those 4.
38 by,
Oh, I give you another one.
yeah, I think it's 38 by 18.
38 by 18. Okay. How are we doing over here at the 2.5? Remember them all?
You didn't give me any.
Oh, did he give you any? Oh, I'm sorry to leave you out.
Oh, I'm fine.
Ty, what did you have?
14 major, 17 and 25.
So you guys,
Just one row.
the flags that are out in the field, so the emergence flags, and they kind of touched on them down there, is we did different color flags. I had a whole coloring system set up, and then Precision screwed it up because they came out with their own flags. But so we did big green flags at 12 hours. So we came out and a few days, a week or 10 days after we planted, we saw our first emergence out in the field. 6 in the morning we came out and we saw some plants starting to pop through. So we waited, and at 6 o'clock that night we came out. Thanks to a group of these guys, they came out and we walked all kinds of different spots, and we put a green flag wherever we saw a sprout coming through. 6 o'clock the next morning we put a small green flag in that said day 1. That night, 6 o'clock, 36 hours, we put a big blue one. Next morning we did a small blue one that said day 2, so that was 48 hours after we saw the first emergence. So we flagged it all the way every 12 hours up to 120 hours.
The other one was 36 and 18.
Including,
36.
so like I said,
Okay.
thanks to all these guys, but also thanks to my wife, because I was out here twice on Mother's Day, slopping around in the mud, because if you guys remember, we got a little rain right there. But, so we flagged, and I think it was over 2,000 flags that were out in this field that we walked like this and plopped them in the ground. So, but what we found on this study, in particular on the depth study, is it was fairly dry when we planted, And so when we came back and flagged these flags, on the 3-inch depth, there was some moisture there. And we knew that when we were planting because we've got smart depth on that planter. We've got 4 of these smart firmers, smart firmers, not smart depth, on that planter. So we knew where the moisture level was. And so we came back, and at 3-inch corn, we had 78% of it all popped between 24, 36, and 48. So between that 24-hour mark and that 48-hour mark, we had 78% of the 17.5 feet that we marked. 78% of those flags popped within the 24-hour period at 3 inches because it was in the moisture. Go up to 2.5, we didn't have near the moisture, and it was only 64%. So we got 14% better emergence by going a 1/2 inch deeper where there was moisture. Now at 2 inch we had 81%, so it was very similar to the 3 inch, but it wasn't as consistent. We had 81% happen right then and there, but that last 19% was sporadic. There was some at 12 hours, there was some at 96, and even one at 120 hours on 2-inch depth, just because of the moisture there. So as I say that that moisture there, if you've got any precision on your planter now, this is a fairly affordable option to add to it. If you've got Keaton seed firmers on there, you pop one of the Keaton seed firmers out and put this on there. It's about $500 for the row to have one. I would tell you that you probably don't need them on every row. Is on that planter we put them on 4 rows, and so 4 of the rows have these on there. So it's on the screen. It's giving us an average of those 4 rows. It's telling us the moisture percentage of that furrow as we're going through. So it's not going to tell us to go 1/2 inch deeper, but we can see what percentage moisture we got. We can get out, we can adjust, we can put the planter 1/2 inch deeper and see if we get to moisture level at that point.
Is the dirt stick on?
What's that?
Is the dirt stick on?
This is the low stick. So this black part is, they were telling me yesterday, I learned this, is this, the black ones are the same material that they make the cutting boards out of, so the dirt won't stick. The white ones, like the Keatons that are on there, those are of like porous material, so that they can get some moisture and dirt into those. We haven't had a very big issue with it at all in this area. There have been some guys, if you got a lot of clay soils, it could be.
Yeah, I've never had seed permanent soil that stick good.
Okay, so
I don't care.
It's these black ones, this black material is the low stick. And they're running them up there. These guys are from South Dakota and Minnesota, and they're running them up there, and they said this is night and day difference. So, but yeah, so this will tell you that moisture level, so you can find that moisture as you're planting. It'll also tell you the temperature of the soil, which I don't expect anybody, if you're driving, if it's time to go and you're planting, and then all of a sudden this tells you that, hey, maybe the soil's a little cool. I know you guys all willingness, you're not going to stop and be like, oh, I'll come back a day or two later, right? Because you're still going to go, and that's fine. But in August, when we're looking at the corn over by the tree line and trying to figure out what happened over there, or what, combining it and trying to figure out why we got 10 bushel less over there, maybe it was cool when we were planting it. So like I say, it can help you be a better decision maker down the road. But that moisture level definitely is something. It will also tell you how clean the furrow is, how much organic matter is in that furrow. So if you're getting a good clean furrow, it tells you those 3 things from this. Like I say, about $500 a row. On a 16 or a 24 row planter, if you put 4 on them, you're probably getting a good average. Row 12 and 13 probably isn't going to be a lot of difference between the 2 rows. So I'd be overselling you if I told you to put them on every one. If you want a very, very good organic matter map, then we could put them on some more. But if you're just trying to get the moisture and the temperature, putting them on every 4 or 5 rows is probably good. So, but they're a nice option, and like I say, once you have precision on there, the SRM, everything's there, it just plugs right into the SRM. So it's a fairly affordable option to put on there. So.
Keep talking, Mitch. I'm almost done.
I don't know what else to say.
That's a verse.
Hey, be quiet. Can't
Somebody
yell
had
at
to
me.
say it.
Also, I will say this, is as I gave you that sales pitch on Smart Firmer, if you don't have them and you want them, sorry, next year, 2022, we're not going to add them to your planter, because we'll put them on next year. So, Except for you guys that ordered planters, we got those taken care of. But right now, Precision's having a little bit of difficulty getting some of the material for the smart planters. So there's a few of the items that are getting sticky right now. And sounds like it's supplier of a supplier of a supplier. It's like three levels down from Precision.
All right, so I wasn't listening, Mitch. I can't remember what you said about the emergence flags, but so what it came out to, and I think we all recognize, right? These are just yield checks, so these are fun to do, but take them with a grain of salt a little bit. But looks like you guys had a little bit lower estimation than last group, so they must have counted a few more kernels than this group did. But so we'll actually know once the yield data comes off. But at least our current yield estimations, 1.5. We were on average at 229. This is averaged from the two groups here. 229 on average at 1.5, 226 at 2, 238 at 2.5, and 3 at 237. So as I just kind of, obviously we got a little bit of variation in there, but as I look at that and just kind of try to see through the data, I would say going a little bit deeper looks like beneficial for us in terms of this field here. Now, the take-home message to this is I don't want you guys to think, oh, Jason at Agco said I need to plant my cord at 3 inches. That's definitely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we need to be checking our moisture levels and our conditions on that day we go to plant our corn to know, where our optimal planting depth should be. And the range I like to use is 1.5 to 3 inches, and depending on where my moisture level is at is where I'll set my depth. Starting point for me is usually at 2 inches, and then I'll adjust it there based off of where that moisture level is and what the extended day forecast is.